talk about privacy and information security. What I'd like to do is try and bring that to your awareness and get you to understand the difference between the two. What a lot of people don't understand is that privacy is really something different than information security. It's really an apples and oranges situation. The way I look at privacy is that it's a hearts and minds aspect of our environment. And it's the best way to treat how we protect data that is entrusted to us. What I'd like to do is talk about some of my background. I first got into the business about 20 years ago with mainframes. When RACF, Top Secret, ACF2 were the main security packages that existed. I graduated from the U, went to a local manufacturing company, decided that I needed to learn more about networks, took the CNE course to find out about networks, went to a local manufacturing company, went there to a local bank, went to work for the state of Utah. I did security work with mainframes, Novell, AD, HPUX, Linux in a variety of flavors, just a variety of different security information in that aspect. And then I went to the University of Utah in 2010 and started working in the privacy office about 3 years ago. The thing that I want to do is talk about privacy and the idea that privacy and information security are oftentimes discussed in the same thing when they're actually not. Privacy and security are actually symbiotic in their relationship. They're two different things. When we talk about security or information, I should say privacy, I want to talk about the definition for privacy. Privacy is more about the appropriate use of data. When we use data and we protect data, what we want to do is we want to ensure that our staff uses data appropriately and doesn't exceed that use or exceed authority of that data. Information security is more about the standard CIA aspects of it, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those are the way that I like to think about information security and privacy. And what we need to do when we're using those ideas is to make sure that we have everything available for information security and privacy as we're working on it. Now, the thing about information security and privacy, or I should say privacy, is regulators typically want to have role-based access. The problem with role-based access is that from an operational standpoint, it's really difficult to do. But it's a thing that you need to think about when you're trying to build out that access. A lot of times it's all about business need and trying to configure everything from to create those roles, to build those roles, and do the best you can. A lot of times it's harder though when you get into a real world environment. The technology controls, a lot of times, we shape those technology controls with VPN tunnels, firewalls, a variety of router rules, taps, anything to shape that traffic. But essentially what those technology controls do is they deliver us to the application, they deliver us to the platform, they send us to where we need to be, they send us to the door. Whereas privacy is, once we're through that door, there's very little control for us from a privacy standpoint. It's privacy that controls how we interact with the application. And that's where we face the struggle of how to keep everything from a regulatory standpoint safe. I look at it as being, what we do is we face I think we face a situation with a group of people in our operational environments, typically we have what I think of it as the 80-20 rule. 80% of our workforce environment, we've got 80% that they just want to do their job. They just want to get done with their job. They just want to roll through it, get finished. But we have 20% that tend to be our chronic problem people. I think about it as being password problems. 20% of our people have password problems consistently. They're the ones that you're always dealing with 20% of the, or constantly every single password change period. If you have passwords that change every 30 days, they're the ones that are always calling you saying you need to have your password changed. In the same token, these are the same people that are caught, I shouldn't say the same people, but you have a group of people that are consistently causing you trouble and violating policy. They're the ones that say to you, is it written in policy? Is it in policy? They're the ones that you're always struggling with when you run into a problem with policy issues. So back to the issue of which comes first, information security or privacy? I really think that information security comes first. Because of the technology and because of what we do to build up technology, we have to really build our information security apparatus and our infrastructure for information security first. Privacy is an after fact. It's built in after we get everything built up. We still need it. We still need to protect that data, but it's after everything else is built. The thing that what we need to do is we need to keep in mind the idea of why we keep various things in place for privacy. There's a variety of different rules that we need to keep in mind. I shouldn't say rules, laws that we have to keep track of. There's the Privacy Act of 2000, Privacy Act of 1974. There's the E-Government Act of 2002. There's HIPAA, which is near and dear to my heart, as well as the Children and, Children and Online Privacy Act, which is called COPA, as well as FERPA, which deals with educational information for students. So what we need to do is keep those aspects in mind. I'm sorry, I'm running my thing off because I'm transferring this stuff. What I'd like to do is talk about the fair information. With all these privacy laws in place, what I'd like to do is give you some ideas on practices that you should keep in mind when you're setting up your privacy practices. The first one being transparency. Transparency deals with the idea of what you want to do is make sure that the data that you take or collect, you're transparent to the user. The user understands that you're going to collect the data, that you'll be transparent about how you use it. The next aspect is individual participation. You want to make sure that the individual that you're sending that or you're using that data, that they understand what it is that you're doing with the data. The one key thing of that is that I would recommend is make it an opt-in aspect. Let them opt into your process. Don't make it an opt-out process. It's better if they have the opportunity to opt into it as versus opt out. My boss, who is the Chief Privacy Officer of the University of Utah, always tells me, don't surprise the patient. And it's really true. You really don't want to surprise the patient because it's the patient that is going to be complaining to HHS if you surprise them with anything. So allow them the opportunity to change that information, allow them to take a look at it if they have to. You want to allow them to opt in. As well as you want to make sure of the purpose specification. Make sure that you tell them exactly why you're using the data. Don't hide these things. Make sure that they understand what you're using it for. Also, make sure when the data minimization, Don't use it for anything else. Use it for what it's supposed to be used for. If it's supposed to be used for research, tell them it's supposed to be used for research. If it's supposed to be used for continuity of care, say it's continuity of care. Don't hide it. Make sure that they understand what it's being done for. Also, use limitation. Make sure that you use it only for what it's supposed to be used for. Don't use it for other purposes. Too often, this data gets used and it's left in there and it's used for some other program, some other place. Don't hide that. If they find out that it's being used for something else, they get very angry. You'd be amazed at how many patients get very angry when they get a flyer from someone that they don't know who they are, and they wonder how they got on somebody's mailing list. It's very upsetting to them. Patients are very particular about their privacy, and they don't want it shared. The other thing is data quality and integrity. Make sure that you protect that information. Make sure that the data is, that you're protecting that information and that you're not sharing it. Also, we get back to information security. Protect it. Don't leave it loose. Don't leave it lying around. Protect it. Don't let it get out. Accountability and auditing. You've got to audit. You've got to keep track of it. Speaking of all these different things, let me share a story with you. Recently, I got a letter in the mail. Somebody had breached my information. I had worked for an employer 20 years ago, and I got a letter indicating that my social security number, my address, my full name, as well as my income for the last 5 years that I'd worked for this employer had been disclosed. How it had been disclosed, how had it gotten out? I mean, I hadn't worked for them for 20 years. What had happened is that someone in the payroll department of this company had gotten a phishing email. In this case, whaling. What happened was the CFO had sent some payroll clerk an email indicating to them that they needed all the accounting records for such and such a period uploaded to a Dropbox account, and up they went, along with mine, and suddenly my social security number is hanging out there in this Dropbox account, and I have a breach. Needless to say, my discussion with their legal counsel was interesting. I didn't get anything that I really wanted, but that's the way it goes, I guess. Anyway, let's talk about what happens with an incident. Now, typically with a privacy incident, we look at it as being anything where you lose control of the data. If you lose control of the data, that's an incident, whether virtual, whether physical, whether you lose it even to the point where you think that it's possibly gone out, even to an email account. HHS, OCR, and I'm always going to come back to patient records, so that's my basis for what I look at. Even if you can't prove one way or another whether there's been access, the way we look at it is if it's gone and we have lost administrative control of that data, we look at it as being a breach. And so when you face those things, you've got to consider it an incident. So we use a 4-factor breach analysis, risk analysis. First, what we do is we look at the nature and the extent of the PHI involved. Typically, you've got to have the factors that are involved to make it an actual PHI incident. For us, it's name, say like a diagnosis. In a PII incident, it would be name, social security number, or a identification number of some kind, a birth date, an address, anything along those lines. We then look for whether it was unauthorized, who the unauthorized recipient was, or user was. We then look at, was it actually accessed or used? A lot of times you can't tell in those situations. For us, if it's out of administrative control, that's what we think. We look at it as being, it is out of control, administrative control, so therefore it's a breach factor. And then we look at the fact of the extent of the risk has been mitigated. What a lot of times we try and do is we will try and get a non-disclosure agreement out in a short period of time where we can actually get the data back, say in a physical situation, get a non-disclosure agreement from the person that has received the data and get it within, say, like 5 days. If we can get that back, we consider that a mitigation of what's occurred and use that as our mitigation task. And we'll consider that to be, we've mitigated the risk, so therefore, to some extent, we'll look at the situation and decide if it's the actual breach. With those things in mind, we go on to the idea of where I think we need to go with incidences and our practices. What I'm really moving towards and what I would really like to do and get across to everyone is that we really need to protect our data. We really need to get our customers' data to have people recognize that it's an asset. It's an asset to the organization. It's an asset we need to protect. We need to get our people, our employees, to recognize that it's an asset, that they need to protect it as well. The other aspect of it is that we need to have employees recognize or at least take ownership. I know that's a hard one to do, but if they'll take ownership of that data and recognize that the data that they control, that they have access to, and they'll take ownership of it, allows for protection of that data, and it will increase our level of protection of the asset. I know that's a tough one, and I know it's hard to do, but I think through training and education, we really can do that. I know there's a lot of training and education that goes on. I know that gets really tedious. People really get tired of saying, oh, I've got another training to do. I've got more education that I keep loading on. But personally, I think the only thing we can do is recognize that with training and education, we've got to instill this in our people, instill this in the organization and get people to recognize the value of data. I mean, there are automated controls that can do this. There's IATRIC, there's Fair Warning, there's Maze, there's Secure Onyx. Those are all good products that can be brought in, that can do the job for you. But the problem is that the expense of these products keeps going up. And I don't know that we have the money to continue to pay the price for these products as they come in. If you're a small organization, I don't think you've got the money for it. I don't know that some of the large organizations have got the money for it. It just keeps getting more and more expensive. That's why I think we need to turn to our people. One of the problems that we face with the automated tools is the fact that we have so many false positives. Our false positive rate is such that I have to go to my people to say, okay, so you have tell me exactly what happened to understand whether this alarm is actually a real alarm. The next thing I worry about with that is it helps me understand what's happening within the system. Because they're at the front line, they can also identify things that are not really showing up within the automated systems. So that we get back to people again to get them to help us out. The other thing to remember about, and I need to get back to an idea of possible outcomes of the issue of compromised privacy outcomes. One of the issues with that is we run into the issue of the exploited privacy issues, it creates trust issues within the individual. It causes embarrassment to the organization. It damages the reputation of the organization. Also, the loss of trust between, say, the patient and the organization. And the thing that really creates an issue also is that when we face those issues, we lose that trust, which really can bring about reputational harm. And so with that loss, that's why I keep coming back to, that's why we need to continue that ownership, that trust aspect of why we need to keep our employees in the game. Key important employee training considerations, and this is where we keep this idea of why we keep people in the game. We want them thinking about, did you obtain the data in an appropriate manner? Minimum necessary. You'd be amazed at how many times we run into issues where we're giving away more information than we have to. You've got to keep in mind when a request is received, just give away what you have to give, the minimum necessary of the request. Are the documents and files secure? Are they authorized storage or portable devices? Encryption. I can't say enough about encryption. If you're not doing encryption, please think about it. Encryption is the best thing that goes for anything. If you're not encrypting your laptops, if you're not encrypting your SANs, if you have that ability, do it. It is the best thing you can do from a regulatory standpoint. I can't say enough about it. Is there a legitimate business need? Are you transmitting the data? Can you share the data? I just recently read about a company that had a business agreement with a covered entity. They got into a financial dispute of some kind about the ongoing maintenance agreement that went for yearly maintenance. Apparently, these guys had a server in place at the covered entity. And because of this financial disagreement, they decided what they do is they had 2 kill switches. They killed 2 of the servers that were in place at the covered entity. What happened was that it denied 4,000 patient records to the covered entity. They lost 4,000 records. Now, with OCR, I'm not really sure who's going to get it in this situation or not. The covered entity is probably going to run into problems because they couldn't immediately get a hold of the data, but I'm pretty sure that the supplier, whoever had the data, is also going to get penalized. So far this year, OCR has penalized to the tune of $20 million, I think $100,000. That's a lot of money. They're getting pretty serious about it. So if you're in a hot healthcare situation, keep that in mind. Did you dispose of the data and equipment that it might have been used in an authorized process? Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee could tell you about that. And also ensure that there's a rigorous sanctions process and consequences that can occur. My sons are big fans of Star Wars, so something to keep in mind. The next thing is policy. Policy is the biggest thing you can keep track of with privacy. The only problem is a lot of people don't keep in mind various aspects of it. They don't keep in mind wrong state. Every state has its own privacy issues. You've got to keep those in place. Wrong data. Systems change. Wrong link. The link doesn't work. The link is going to the wrong place. The link is not there. Wrong technology. You've got the wrong technology listed. Wrong promise. You promise something that you don't keep. Wrong promise part 2, same as the first one. Wrong guarantee. You guarantee that you won't share data, which is wrong. There are situations where you have to share data with vendors and other people. If there's a court order, you have to share data. Wrong version of the policy. How many times do you run into the wrong version of the policy? I've run into it a lot. Wrong training. Problem is who reads the policy? If you don't read the policy, if your employees don't read the policy and an auditor asks them, tell me about the policy, and they can't answer it, that's a ding. Wrong practice. That's the point of where does the policy meet the practice? If they don't meet together, you've got a problem. Finally, the takeaways that I want to do is please add privacy to your vocabulary. Use it in conjunction with information security in a sentence. Privacy is a key component of how you control and protect sensitive data. Privacy is a hearts and minds process. Train your employees to utilize the key concepts of the fair information privacy practices. Recognize the privacy provider provides protection to your organization assets, and use your employees as a piece of that protection envelope to wrap protection and controls around your sensitive data. Any questions? Thanks.